just like honey, sweet to taste on burning lips. Warm and live beneath the water, feeling icy fingertips. Soothing nectar to my body, wash the image from my eyes. Dirty streets of hungry people, drink the water, dry your eyes. Let's not look at the reflections, listen to the music made. Drinking water's ease the mind, thoughts of you begin to fade.
Get yourself together before it's too late. Good evening, everybody. We'll look at the picture in a bit. It's Divided We Stand on Friday night. Now, I know this is unusual to be on a Friday night, although I've done this, I think now this is the second time in 2 months. Can't do it tomorrow night. So I already talked with Sandy. I told her that, I understood. and I imagine we wouldn't have too many viewers tonight. But that's not what I'm concerned about, because this is always recorded, and that's all that really matters. And that's the truth. That's all that matters. So I'm not really worried if everybody's over there. We've got Judy Washington here. Hi, Judy. Keep on posting, and I love the videos with Hal Sparks, because Hal is tremendous. Smart guy. Veg, good to see you from London, Ontario. T-Bone. Like I said, this was one of those things where I had to go on Friday night. And quite frankly, you know, most of the viewers on Environmental Coffee House are not political as, say, the viewers here. I mean, there is some overlap. And obviously tonight, some of my viewers will be over there. But I have so few viewers that it doesn't really matter. It really doesn't matter. I hope I don't have an echo. I have a little bit of an echo on my side. So if I do have an echo, please tell me before I continue. All right? Check. 1, 2. Hi, Keith. And I'll begin in a minute or two. Kind of an unusual show tonight. Not only because it's on Friday night, but the way I'm going to approach the show and what I'm talking about is a little bit different. Kinky's here. T-Bone, everybody. No echo. Okay, that sounds good. For me, I do hear an echo, and I don't know why this is occurring. And it's not time for me to really play around with this. But as long as you don't hear the echo, I guess that's fine. Veg, I did watch the video that you mentioned from Soft White Underbelly. I thought you were joking when you said that Hambone was on there. It was a great interview. And during the week, a lot of things have happened, of course, with politics and just in general for myself. My attitude is such that I had to get out of my normal mode of thinking. And the only way I can do that is to brainstorm and do reading and just do things differently. You know, I mean, you know that we all have to get out of our zone of comfort to grow as individuals. You know, it's kind of like, you know, opening the door with your left hand instead of your right hand every once in a while, or going a different way home or something like that. So I did a lot of that this week. I think I had to do it. And I want to share with you my brainstorming. I can't endorse anything that I say as truth, but I'd like to just put it out there. Because all you know, my frustration with people in general, but specifically the Republican Party and Republicans, so much so that I essentially have no friends who are Republicans anymore. Right? Yeah. That's the way it goes. So, oh, by the way, Gary, hello. And I actually saved the video you were talking about. You mentioned the 18-minute point. I read around 20. Later in the show, I'll discuss it because I think Ann Applebaum said something really, really important. Okay. So how do I start this? Okay, so first of all, I did watch Soft White Underbelly, the interview with Hambo. Last week, for the life of me, I couldn't remember his name, and I don't even remember what I called him. I couldn't remember. Humbleweed, something like that. But I saw it, and I thought it was a great interview. And Sam went to this whole spiel about, you know, we're so fucked and this and that. And And I've gotten very, very, I don't want to say callous, but I'm just kind of immune to that kind of discussion now because I've always kind of had a realistic view, a pragmatic view of what happens in the world, like much of you. Um, and I could certainly say that same thing. I could say, it's just the sky's falling, and it kind of is. But me as an individual, I need to, in my own mind, be able to frame and understand the bad situation in my own way, just like a student. Sam Mitchell, right? A student has to learn in his or her own way. And just because I may be a specific type of learner or teacher doesn't mean that that student can connect. So I went through this brainstorming period as I was reading, and I first heard of the territorial imperative. I don't know if you've heard about it. I first heard of the territorial imperative when I was in college. I was reading letters to the editor type of page at Bowling Green State University, probably around 1981. And somebody from New York City who was a graduate student at Bowling Green, mentioned the territorial imperative. Now, if you're not familiar with it, I'll briefly discuss how this idea grew and who proposed this idea, as far as I know. Okay, so there was an American playwright. His name is Robert Ardrey. Let me put his picture up here, give you some type of idea of who this person was. Okay, that guy, Robert Ardrey. He died in 1980. He was a guy, again, who was a playwright for something like 20 years or so. But he was very unusual because he, mid-career, this guy just stops and he gets into anthropology. It would be like as if all of a sudden I'm a teacher and then, the next day I decide to just do something completely different, like be an artist. And he loved anthropology, and he became very, very versed in it. He could have, discussions with anthropologists and hold his own. So he wrote a book called The Territorial Imperative, which of course I'm reading now and making a connection with my past in reading those comments about the territorial imperative. And the original comments were about conflict in the Middle East, which I'm not talking about tonight. But to give you an idea of what Ardrey discussed about the territorial imperative was that, in his opinion, and many anthropologists' opinion, we have innate drives and instincts. And prior to this idea of the instinct of the territorial imperative, people would assume that human beings have two basic, very strong drives. And that would be, of course, food and sex. But as Ardrey proposed, he said that there is such an instinct called the territorial imperative that you see in nature, and that I'll discuss in a second, that is actually stronger than those two instincts, if you'd like to call it that. So let's come up with an example of the territorial imperative for those of you who haven't heard of it. And Ardrey's not a big name out there or anything like that, and most people probably haven't even heard of his idea of the territorial imperative. So imagine a squirrel, and he's doing his thing, and he's eating his acorns and whatnot. He's got his little environment, around him. A mouse passes by, or a bird might pass by, and the squirrel will generally do nothing in most cases. And most animals, not all, but most animals instinctively are like that. They see another invading their territory. They don't freak out, get aggressive, except when it's one of their own. And you've seen this too. I mean, I've seen it in my backyard, my front yard. When another squirrel gets involved, and they go crazy, and they go running up the trees and chasing each other. And Ardrey basically believed that we didn't want to accept that that was part of us too, this territorial imperative. You know, if people invading our territory, you cannot invade our territory. And there's the other side of anthropology where they say that there's this blank slate, that maybe in the past there were urges to aggression when it came to territory, but now we're a blank slate. And for human beings, it doesn't happen. We're something separate from the animals. We've gone above that. We've created our own rules. We're outside of evolution. And to a certain extent, we are. I mean, we've created cities and comfort so that we didn't have to go forage, and you don't have to be super strong to win in this game. You have to be smart. But there are these people who say we're the blank slate. Many anthropologists. Even Steven Pinker, if you've listened to Steven Pinker, he promotes the idea that we've gotten less aggressive and less violent, and he presents some facts because you can see that man was much more aggressive back then, but it doesn't take into account certain things. I mean, first of all, it's a very short time frame that we're talking about recently, and let's suppose somebody decides to take his finger and push the button, and we can all go down, and everything he says would not be true. So even though Ardrey, I should say, wasn't a degreed anthropologist, he was really, really well read, and he was around a circle of people. And then you basically had two groups. And I think Stephen Jay Gould didn't particularly appreciate Ardrey and his ideas, but people have come around to it. And then during the week, something kind of dawned on me in this whole idea of the territorial imperative, this aggression that's within us. For territory, of course. And it goes back to a movie. And I always knew something was peculiar about it. And then when I did some Google searches, I wasn't the only one who had thought about this. So I've spoken about this movie before. And that is 5 Easy Pieces. And we all know the scene in the diner where he tells the woman to put the sandwich between your knees, and he throws the soda and the water off the table and clears everything out. And it's a movie about somebody who's soul searching, trying to find himself. And it isn't a typical movie in the sense that you're waiting for the end to see what happens. I mean, the plot is not terribly important. It's the individuals, and specifically the one individual in his search to find himself. But there is this scene, and I have part of it, which I'm going to show you. and then I do have the text to the scene, which will relate to what I'm speaking about. And I don't know if Bob Rafelson put that in there on purpose or not, because principally the movie is about this person who he can't identify with himself. He can't identify himself, and that happens to us. So I'm sorry, T-Bone. We'll see you next time. Hope everything turns out in some positive way. Yeah. So let me show you that scene. I think you'll all be familiar with it. Maybe you haven't watched the movie as much as I have in my life, because I've watched it for different reasons. I'm a big Nicholson fan. It was Nicholson's first big role. He did play an Easy Rider, but he was a supporting actor. But in this film, this was his first big one, and it catapulted him into the other films. So let's check out the scene that I'm talking about. Now, you see Susan Anspach. She's dead now. Ralph Waite, he's dead. And by the way, this film helped Ralph Waite get the role in The Waltons, if you remember that show. But let's not concern ourselves with that, and nor should I even probably have said that. Let's get to
What would you say that more ill is done in the love than in the name of revolution? No. You are a woman, and once was supposed to be married, so you can be excused from objecting. I think these cold, objective discussions are aggressive. Excuse me. Let's react. Reviving people are dancing spirits. Having danced spirits. But I should hope not. But I want to say they're still open. And long for your age. Would you read down on
I'm getting echo. I don't. Maybe you don't hear, but I. It's unacceptable. All right. How do I stop it? All right.
Little pussycat Cat two little white rabbits. And I was crazy to her.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. Sorry about that, Veg and Judy and everybody else. But what I will do is show you the text, because that's all that really matters. But at least in the future, if you go on to YouTube, you'll be able to find. All right. Shouldn't be any echo now. Now, there is some kind of personification going on here. The woman who plays that pompous lady her name is Samia Glavia. I think it says that Glavia in Latin is kind of like the arrow at the end of a spear. So there's aggression there as it is. So, yeah. So she says in that scene, but you see, man is born into the world with his existent adversary from the first. It is his historic, mythic inheritance. So is this startling? Aggression is prehistoric. An organism behaves according to its nature, and its nature derives from the circumstances of its inheritance. The fact remains that primitive man took absolute delight in tearing his adversary apart. And there is where I think the core of the problem resides. So, later in the scene, Nicholson, who plays the role of, I forget his name, Bobby Dupia, something like that, Dupia. And he says, "You're bullshit, you're full of shit, you are a pompous celibate," and interesting scene. But again, it's kind of ironic that you kind of hear the territorial imperative there. That this whole idea of trying to protect one's territory is even stronger than the two strongest impulses or instincts. I got to be really careful when I say. So I'm throwing this around my head all week because I can't, and I'm not putting myself above anybody. I can't just simply say, "Oh, we are screwed." Climate change, crazy politics, I've had it. And we kind of are. But we've always been screwed. We're all going to, we all have existential dread. We're all going to die, no matter whether there's a cataclysmic thermonuclear event or just any type of cataclysmic event in terms of heat, whether it's war, whatever it is, or just our own death. We all face existential dread. All of us. So in that sense, we were all screwed since the day we were born. And I can accept that because I have to accept it. But I can better accept these things when I understand them, at least at my own level. Like a student has to understand me at my own level, or at his or her own level, I should say. And it's there that I can perhaps live with this better. Try to take myself outside of it. And I probably can't make a good analogy unless I bring up like a tripping. Because it's, the idea of, all of a sudden your ego's pulled out and you're an onlooker and there's, not yourself there. You're peering in, not as yourself. The ego's gone. It's frightening. So I'm trying to look at this in a certain way from the outside in instead of from the inside out. Because it's damn frustrating dealing with people. Because at their level, I'm the crazy one, you're the crazy one. And you and I know we're right. At some point, somebody's right. And I think whether Ardrey was right or not, because I don't know for sure, whether he was right or not, he probably felt like I do very strongly. And if I'm wrong, then everything's messed up. Because these same people, these Trumpers, they say all the wrong things. They're always wrong. So I need to understand this at some level. And so today, this week, I simply wanted to brainstorm. I told myself, I don't have to be original. I don't even have to be right. And I tell this to my students. I just have to think for myself. If I can get that far, maybe one day I'll be able to accept this. So I'm trying to look at this as something instinctual with these people. Now, even in that movie, Samia Glavia, the role of the woman Samia Glavia plays later in that scene, she says it doesn't tend to happen with the upper class. Of course, that's when Nicholson goes off. And I am not trying to put myself above the Trumper, though I think I'm rational and correct. But maybe I've been fooling myself, or maybe we've been fooling ourselves all along. Maybe it's just instinct that we keep, how we keep trying to pound it in. Like, here are the facts. Look at the sea rise. Look at the temperatures. Look at the fact that we haven't had the snows like we usually have. And then they still don't go for it. And you say, how can they be that stupid? Maybe it's something more base. Maybe there's something to this territorial imperative. If, in fact, Ardrey is correct, that it's much stronger than sex and food, which is an incredible hurdle if it's true. If it is, in fact, stronger than those two instincts, we'll call them instincts tonight, then this is something that kind of answers the question, why are they the way they are? Is this an instinct of theirs? Just like the instinct of the squirrel to protect its area. And this instinct, we can't be so bold as to say this just happened with Trump. This instinct goes way back. It's the instinct within us all. I mean, we can look at modern civilization and say, okay, well, go back, maybe living in groups to, 20,000 years. I have no idea. I'm a novice. But in terms of, 1.8 billion years of living things compared to 20,000 years at the most, you see what you're going up against. This instinct, this territorial instinct, the territorial imperative, tribalism. Yeah, I mean, essentially it's the same thing. And when we say that Trump brought it out of them, maybe there was this thing that just opened up that instinct. With the squirrel realized that the other squirrel was there. It wasn't the mouse, it was you and me. And maybe there was a point where they thought, we're going to take over. And my suggestion would be that's when President Obama won. And that territorial instinct came in. And if you think about it, it wasn't until, it was 93 was when the contract with America started, but the Republicans didn't negotiate with Obama at all. And I would suggest that was the territorial imperative. And it's frightening because he was a great president. I mean, his only mistake was he just tried to be too nice to them. He tried to he gave them what they wanted. I'll try to negotiate with you. Didn't even get Merrick Garland in. So this doesn't make it any easier for you and me. Whether I'm right or not, I don't know. I'm not really concerned about saying that I'm right. I'm not. Hi, Karen. But what I am saying is that I had to look at it in a way that I could understand it. And I'm not going to say that this is specifically the territorial imperative. But if you look at things, it is an explanation. You know, it's an explanation, and it's explanation. It's going to be hard to deal with it, but at least you have some ideas. This is why they're not going to change. And then how do we deal with it? How does that other squirrel deal with the squirrel that's, implacable, intransigent? I don't know. It's frightening. Now, Gary Peacock, I believe he's watching right now still, hopefully. Hi, Karen. Hi, Kinky. Gary posted something on Divided We Stand. It was an interview with Jon Stewart and Ann Applebaum. Now, Ann Applebaum wrote Twilight for Democracy. And around the 20-minute point, I was going to show you this, but I can't deal with it. I've got to figure out, I think it's loopback. I'm going to have to just get rid of loopback and use eCam like alone for the audio. But I'll experiment with that some other time during the week. But around the 20-minute point of this video, and you can find it on YouTube, Ann Applebaum, and she lived in Hungary for a while. She was in Poland, so she knows this. She mentions Viktor Orban because Jon Stewart's mentioning, well, it's just not an American thing. The seeds are growing everywhere. Russia, Hungary, Brazil. I'm sure there are a few others. But she specifically mentioned what Orban said when he gave a speech to, was it CPAC, the conservative Trumper group. And it came right out of the Russian notebook. Orban said, it's a lot easier to win. I'm paraphrasing. Hold on to power when you eliminate, one, the opposition, and two, the journalists. And this is what's been going on in Russia for the last 20 years. Journalists being killed, opposition being killed. I think at least 71 journalists had been killed in the last 20 years, at least 71. Opposition, Boris Nemtsov, killed. Magnitsky, they say he wasn't killed, but they put him in prison and he died. Navalny, big mistake, coming back thinking that people would just revolt with him. Didn't happen. And this is why we have to worry. Because Trump, in the end, he wants control of the media. So as much as the opposition, he wants to get rid of the Democrats. And they've done everything to do that. You look, they've gerrymandered. They have, the states are set up. We've been through this before. North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming. Nobody lives there, but they have 2 senators. Right, Judy. I just noticed Judy's coming here. Exactly. It's the Russian handbook. because he can't create his own handbook, although he is kind of like a mob boss. But it's the journalists I fear in this country. Because for them, I fear, because what he will do, he may not have them killed, so to speak, though I'm sure he would do it if it were possible. He lets his minions threaten. See these people back here from CNN in the back? The fake news? Get them out of here. So what does he do? He'll be just like Kyle Rittenhouse, jumping state lines, becoming a de facto policeman, and killing 3. Is it 3 or 2? Doesn't matter. And these people will do it. If this were Russia, and this were a Russian broadcast, I'd be silenced. And the more open I would speak, the greater chance I'd be gulagged, or sometime be a report in the future that I somehow fell out of a hotel window, which seems to be happening a lot in Russia. Just happened to fall out. So where do we go with this brainstorming? It's certainly not the answer to the situation, right, Anthony? But like a trip, that scary trip where you're outside of your ego, when your ego leaves you, perhaps we have to look outside the situation instead of being inside of it. You know, just not be angry. Get outside of it. Try to look outside of yourself at what's going on here. Something that has been a part of evolution as we know it. They're trying to protect themselves. They see themselves as being invaded by us. And of course, you and I know they're basically criminals, just like Putin. 40% of, or 80% of the forces from Wagner are from prisons. It's criminal what these people do. But the Kyle Rittenhouses, and if I may add, the Bruce Schraders of the world, Judge Bruce Schrader, for want of a better expression, they have in their minds the territorial imperative. They believe because of the territorial imperative, they have the right to do this. They go above the law. They're outlaws. And it's something, if it is true, what Ardrey said, if it is true, this is something that's been going on for millions of years. And perhaps it was all unavoidable. Yeah. Let's look at some of the commentary. I want to see if anybody's talked about the territorial imperative. I've been seeing a few comments here, but yeah, let's see if we can get here. Okay, all the hellos here. So again, if you haven't checked this out on Divided We Stand on the group page, Facebook, check it out. It's a good post. I personally like it after the 20-minute mark. All right, let's see if we have any. I did put out a video, Gary, during the week, an animated video that I couldn't come on Saturday night. Yeah, you called it. I do enjoy. It's one of my, you know, local fetishes, watching Philadelphia sports. Go Jalen Hurts. But right now we'll talk serious stuff. Thank you, T-Bone, even though you're not here. Yeah, if they cut Social Security, Kinky, I think even Trump has said something about that. Don't do that, because that's your money. Hi, Epi from Scotland. Yeah. All right, let's get to, okay, here, Epi. Territorial drives you to select a seat in the theater. Yeah. You got to find that seat. And hopefully nobody will sit next to you, right? Defend your natural environment. I agree with Ardrey completely. He was just realizing passive this week ties to my friendship with Hutch. And anybody who knows, Gary's friend was friends with what's his first name? God, Hutchins. I used to write out checks for him all the time. Bob Hutchins. Yeah. A basketball coach. Yeah. I had no neighborhood growing up. When going to other neighborhood to play with schoolmates, there's always several assholes who looked down at me, who wanted to start fights. A protective reaction. Yeah, it's kind of like gang warfare. I then thought of the vitriol felt, or at least expressed, at the neighboring high school. Rivalries, Bridgeton versus Violin in Millville, used to be very intense, us against them. Yeah, and that's local. And this happens in every country. I know in Russia, certain sports teams, the hockey teams, the city, Judy, Socrates promoted tabula rasa, blank slate. And maybe there is blank slate. I think there are parts of it that are blank. Because I really do believe the environment. I told you I believe in determinism. Now, how much instinct? I know that there are, certain specific instincts, like large bangs, noises. We all still have that instinct. Right? Or when you're threatened, that's that instinct. We do know that. I mean, you can just be walking down the street, and if you hear a bang, the adrenaline goes. But there is this blank slate. If you grow up in a certain area where there's a nurturing environment, like if you had two twins, if one was in a tough area, you could more often than not find that the one in the nurtured environment would do well comparatively. When 9, we took my brother to college in North Carolina, where some students yelled "Yankee go home" upon seeing our Jersey license plates. Yeah. But you see, this one, and I have to be careful, because what I'm saying, it's not territory in the sense of an actual border, although that could be occurring with certain states, like Texas. They kind of have that. But it's almost like a mental territory. Like they're invading. I am invading on, or impinging on their ability to have that philosophy that they have. Epi, I need to read Ardrey. If I remember the stuff I read about territorial power, also had an equation for it, as when you go to war, kind of mathematically. I haven't got to that point yet with it. Animals and territory, it defines this. Or the non-existential real box. Yeah, we'll have to discuss and share on those. Privately, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I almost died when I was 11 in a bicycle accident, but I went into shock and I went out. I don't remember anything about it. But I do know the experience of losing the ego. You know, being, things are getting separated in your mind. You know, in certain sense it's beautiful, but on the other sense it's frightening. Yeah. Trump supporters are delusional, desire to return to a time that's quite in their fixated imagination. They leave it to Beaver scenario. Yeah. And they believe in that world. A world that never really existed. I mean, if you think about it, even with movies, I mean, how long does it take to just get one little scene? You have to create this environment. And even if this thing with Alec Baldwin now, it's still trying to figure out what the hell happened. Hi, Karen. Thank you. Dems have always been too nice. Well, see, here's the problem, Kinky. And I agree with you. And I know what you feel about Merrick Garland, and I am kind of back to that thinking again. I think you do have to be tough, but you have to do it in a way that you don't embarrass yourself. I think it was on MSNBC this morning. The Rev said, essentially, Rev from Sharpton, don't gloat out loud at the ridiculous things that they're doing. Don't bask outwardly in happiness when the Republicans make their mistakes, because you'll look bad. And I think the same thing is when you're being tough, you got to do it in a certain way that you don't become the mob boss, you don't become them, and that takes a lot to figure that out. How do you be tough? Basically, how do you fight with one arm behind the back and win? But you have to do something. But I would generally agree with you. Democrats have to be tougher. We look back on President Obama. You say, well, why didn't you just forget about the Republicans? Just get this crap through. Put Merrick Garland in. I mean, he tried to do the right thing. Look, I know a lot of you are at Environmental Quality House, and that's fine. So if you're watching it now after the show, I'm live now, but I understand. And I just couldn't do it. And sometimes Sandy has to do her show on Saturday. We're okay. It's a different target market. I take territorial imperative on a personal level as an instinct, and not something that comes with foreplanning, but it's the knock on the cumulative effects of your territory causing your reaction. Yeah, I mean, I certainly am not putting myself above it. If somebody starts hanging out in front of my property at 3 a.m, I mean, I remember some kids were banging on my door one night around my local area, and my drone started going, and that felt instinctual. And when I called the cops, I said, "Look, I'm getting kind of nervous here." And they said, "Sir, calm yourself down. Don't get crazy." Yeah. Yeah, Trump lit the fuse. And again, I want to make sure, if you're watching now, I'm not saying that this is correct. This was just simple brainstorming to get me out of this funk of continually saying we're screwed. Because that doesn't work for me. It works for other people. It's not my nature to play the game, and when we're losing 7-2, to just say we're screwed. I know we're screwed, but I want to make it at least 7-4 or 5. I want to win the third period. Or at the very least, I want to understand why I'm losing. I can't just say we're screwed. It's not in my nature. It's not my instinct. Yeah, within Russia, I would be in prison or dead. His minions now control the purse strings. They may crash the world's economy, then their civil war can happen, the others go bye-bye. And it's certainly possible. Look at New Mexico, where the GOP candidate was shot. Oh, that's horrible. I know I'm behind by, I don't know, how many minutes. I wish I had a time on these things. I would know when I came up. You're right, Veg. That sickened me. 30, 40 years ago, they would have roughed him up, put him in jail. But this is what it's come to. Radicalism on the MAGA far right. Veg, yes. Unfortunately, that act has probably incented more than these. Yeah. Again, and essentially, these people are unpaid assassins for the autocrats. It's a Wild West for Congress. They suck. It certainly seems that way because they're outlaws. You're right, Kinky. And again, I flip-flopped. I was really against him. And then after his press conference a few months ago, I thought, well, okay, he's got it under control. And now I'm back to it. Because now to me, he's nothing more than Bob Mueller. Completely dropped the ball. He's like the football player, who's had a good season, but when he gets into the big game, he drops the ball. And he did. If you're going to be the hero, you've got to expect really tough times. And they're going to be pointing at you. But you've got to hold out. And he hasn't. Every Sunday in the woods nearby, they practice. The farmland is all white. Though my hometown is a den of color, I've sensed for some time that I live amongst travel. Yeah. It's frightening. It's frightening. And I do hear the guns Sunday mornings. I know what they're doing, too. It's revolting. What is it with these people, Gary? I mean, and I see it when I go to ShopRite. I'll every once in a while, I'll see a pickup truck with a Confederate flag. Like, I need to see that in Bridgeton or anywhere. Makes me sick. They don't understand the significance of their own ignorance. It's revolting. And that's another point. I'm glad you brought that up, Anthony. There were obviously time periods during which nothing much changed. Pleistocene or whatever it was. Even time seemed not to move because just nothing changed for millions and millions of years. And whatever was living could continue to live the way it did. And with a certain amount of proper expectation, they wouldn't have to worry too much because things just continued the way they were. And we get very comfortable, years and years of comfort, thinking that things can change. And you've got to be able to be pliable if you're going to survive this thing, because things do change. And we're kind of like, you see these animals frozen in time, like in something in amber, or something that was part of, you've seen with Vesuvius, with these these people who were just kind of frozen in time. They weren't able to anticipate the events that could have occurred. Oh, that's just Smokey up there. That does it all the time. Don't worry about it. And then an hour later, it might as well be 3,000 years. They're frozen because they couldn't deal with the change that was about to occur. And this is what has happened for over 1 billion years. And this is another thing I'm going to have to think about. In addition to the territorial imperative, it's the idea that, we get very or too comfortable thinking that our environment is generally going to stay the same. That our level of comfort will generally be the same. Well, it's not. And I never would have expected this. As a young kid, I didn't like the idea of the Vietnam War and would I eventually go into war. But I didn't expect this. The bigotry, the racism, the ignorance that I knew was there in pockets. But I was too naive to understand how pervasive this, if it turns out to be, instinct, some of it learned, whatever it is, it's there. And I'm trying to deal with it as well as I can. Imagine me the way you know me, folks, and I have to go into a parking lot and see some asshole with a pickup truck and a Confederate flag. It violates everything that I think about, everything that my parents thought about. And I'm so lucky to have had parents that were progressive and had zero bigotry. I was very lucky. But it's hard to take. This is 2023, and I see this shit. And it's not like once every 2 years, I hear and see things that I naively believe were outliers. Lots of evil ones in Stefanik's district. Yeah, it's in New York too. She's Alex DeGrasse was Santic's campaign advisor to DeGrasse. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Stefanik appear often on Bannon's War. I wouldn't doubt it. Gary War. Well, my godfather's son was a Proud Boy who was a keynote in Charlottesville. He was a Jewish pretending to be European. He died suspiciously. Wow. That is crazy stuff. Ugh. Texas wants to be an independent nation. Well, I hope Austin wants to be independent, get out of Texas. We'll create a state within a state. Because Texas won't allow that, right? That's the thing. Sorry, but everybody's to blame for Santa. Neither side vetted him. I would agree. You would think that we would have vetted him on our side. Do your homework. Yeah. Where's Garland regarding Santa? Santa's getting an election. Right. Yeah, where is he? The only one that's holding him accountable are the journalists. It's the journalists. And by the way, when I was talking about the tripping thing, I'm not necessarily talking about a near-death experience, although I'm sure that probably might be similar to a trip, so to speak. But again, the only reason I brought that up is the feeling of being outside of yourself, which is frightening. Or it puts you in a state of mind, an altered state that you don't feel comfortable with, because it's not normal. Scary as fuck when young. Do not have any ego to protect yourself through. Hey Trev. I am permabanned from House Bark Chat because I believe Merrick Garland is terrible. Really? That's kind of strange. You would think that Hal wouldn't have a problem with that. Or at least the people who are doing the wrenching. Phil Hittner, yeah. They're good reports. We're human, so I don't put all my eggs in Dem Get basket, but I wouldn't buy a Republican chicken, yeah. Like I said, the Republicans are always wrong. The Democrats are weak sometimes, but when somebody's always wrong, there's Hitler, and then there's, something else. Not quite as bad, but bad enough. He does. Brian, we're going to fight till we can't. The club has decided against our sponsorship. Denied. That club has decided against our sponsorship. Denied. Yeah. Very insightful. Yeah, I think he speaks Ukrainian, so he's a lot of insight. Cumberland County used to have clam marches. See, this is one good thing about Cherry Hill. It wasn't like that when I lived there. It was very progressive. I mean, there were issues in Cherry Hill, but it was a liberal, at least on the east side, it was a liberal community. Basically a liberal Jewish community. The right are feeding their own anger, resentment, and isolation every time they vote for whomever they think is good for them. There are many niches in party. They are pro-Julian Assange, pro-Bernie, etc. Hal Sparks doesn't like Bernie. I still like Hal Sparks. Again, I know that each person has a few things here or there that I have an issue with, but I like his ability to think. Just as I said, doesn't have to be original all the time, doesn't have to be right, but is he a thinker? You have to at least start there. I tell that to all my students. Just think something, but learn to do it for yourself. If you get that out of it, it's a start. And Hal Sparks is a thinker. He's a smart guy. Whether you like him or not, he's a smart guy. Let's put it this way. If he debated somebody like Trump, Trump would be buried. He'd make a fool of him. Yeah, they did. Huh? I don't know where you go with it now. Alan Watts on the Eternal Now is an excellent YouTube video. I used to, listen to Alan Watts. He got a little bit too loose for me, but his voice was pleasant. There was something about that was kind of interesting. Wasn't my bag, so to speak, but yeah. I like listening to Lenny Bruce because even though it's removed the politics of today, he kind of spoke my language. Plus, he could sing. His delivery was funny, but he got to the core of things. He always got to the core of it. It's all the state, which gives clarity. Yeah. I see it here too, Brian. I was behind a pickup covered with an F Trudeau stickers. I love oil and gas, guns, rights, the same energy. Remember the truckers convoy, right? And I remember when you did your videos and see, again, my naivete. I'm thinking that most Canadians are very liberal, educated. I wouldn't do that kind of thing. But they do Club Seals too. And I've said it many, many times that there's, and this is not to stigmatize or to insult Canadians. The Canada is, the culture's not, it really is what it is. It's not too much different. I mean, you might pronounce a couple of words differently. But somebody from Windsor, Ontario, is going to be a lot more like people from Michigan than people from Alabama. The geography is really so close. Just like I'm in the Philadelphia metropolitan area, but I'm not even from Pennsylvania. But I'm a lot more like Philadelphians than I am people from Red Bank, New Jersey. You know, and I've never seen any use for it, but I'm keeping an open mind to that, Anthony. Judy agrees with me there. He's a valuable tool in kind of understanding the issue. He gives insight. And we can't expect him to be right on everything. And I like just listening to him. I don't like looking at the way he dresses for something, but that has nothing to do with him as a human being. To me, it's hard to watch with his hair and all, and sometimes he does a lot of strange things with the animations, which I do too sometimes. But I listen to him. I say, this kid, he's a kid to me, but he's not. He's in his 40s. He's smart. I'm more George Carlin, Bill Hicks, and obviously Bill Conrad. Well, I liked all of them. I mean, Hicks, Carlin. But Lenny Bruce, you know, he started it. And then after that, I actually identified more with, I mean, I like Carlin, don't get me wrong. But some of his shtick was not political in the beginning. But Richard Pryor, in his own way, was kind of like Lenny Bruce. Because he kind of got at the root of things. And in a really funny way. They were both kind of like mirror images. Pryor could do it within the African American community, but could get people outside the African American community to understand. And Lenny Bruce would do like the Jewish shtick, but could get others to understand. And if you listen to the audience, not either one of them, whether it's Richard Pryor or Lenny Bruce, you get that same type of laughter, like when there's only a few people who get his joke. Right? Like they don't always laugh at everything on either one of them, but you get that one guy go, aha, you hear like that one guy laughing hard, like that really caught what they were saying. Because that one or two people who really caught it saw the genius in what he was saying. It hit, that a truth hit. And in that sense, you know, Pryor and Bruce did it. And I started listening to Pryor before I listened to Lenny Bruce. I remember I had this album with Richard Pryor, and I was only like 13, but it just hit me. You know, I thought that's funny. Like I'm resonating with it. And I'm African American, but it didn't matter. He came across in a way that I got what he was saying, even at the age of 13. And then at 14, 15, I started reading up on Lenny Bruce and listened to a few albums and read one of his books. I remember I read something in high school by Lenny Bruce. One of the few books I ever read in high school. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's my naivete. So you get it. You know. You would have thought the ivermectin would have killed worms eating their brains. Yeah. Ivermectin. I think it was Sparks said something about that with people were taking ivermectin. They were Trumpers. They were still getting COVID and all. But what was helping them is it was actually helping them because many of them found out they had worms. And that's kind of a not so common thing. You have to be kind of dirty to get worms. So it was actually killing the worms in them. Ugh. Maybe it was true, but I know Hal mentioned that. In Montreal, my daughter says it's very liberal. She said other provinces not so much, just like our different states. I would imagine Alberta would be a problem, but I don't know. So many Americans believe you can't go to Quebec if you don't speak French. Most of the Americans are right-wingers. Richard Pryor said factual things in a funny way. Yeah. Even about himself. I mean, in a certain way, it kind of relates to 5 Easy Pieces. I think Richard Pryor, through his, time in the hospital, he learned more about himself. That, he could trust other people. And he started believing in people like his wife, doctors. Not everybody was screwed up. But yet, again, he had this way of saying, "Oh yeah, that happened to me too," or "I understand that." And both of them had that, and they were serious too. And now that I think of it, Lenny Bruce had said, that, and you'll forgive me if I repeat myself. I don't know if I said it today or some other show. Lenny Bruce said, you have to have your material, but built into your material, there has to be that 10% or so of, spontaneous humor. And now looking, and I guess because Bruce did do that, somebody heckled him, he'd have a way to nail them. But Pryor did that too, and it was okay for him to go off script. And he wouldn't lose any of it didn't go down in quality of humor. It was like a seamless flow when he was improvising, and then when he did his routine, there was no change, and that's real ability. You don't get that too much with people, even the most talented ones. Yes, he was a junkie. But many people believe that was brought on upon by the pressures that he was feeling from the cops every single time he performed. And he got tired of having to defend himself. It killed him. Yeah, I mean, we know that the needle was in his arm, and that some people try to escape. And he was still a human being, right? I mean, they've been a star. He had it. Most comedians have that kind of thing. I mean, when you tell the truth, a lot of tough things happen to you. Just find out what happened to Sergei Magnitsky, the honest Russian accountant. That's why we have sanctions right now. He had a code. He lived by it. And he died by it. I'm not ready to ditch the mask. Me personally, I'm okay with it. Most people don't wear it, but so anyway, I don't want to hold you too long. The reason why I came on tonight again was because, quite frankly, I wanted to watch the Eagles. It's something I've done since I was a little kid. My father took me to my first Eagles game. I saw the Cowboys, I think in '65. And at that time, I was impressed by speed. So my favorite player, even though I liked the Eagles, my favorite player was a guy named Bob Hayes. Of course, my father loved me, and he was a football fan. And he knew I wanted to see Bob Hayes. So we saw Bob Hayes. And I remember my father, I said, Dad, how long, and I was like 5, I said, how long does it take him to run down the field? Like 12 or 13 seconds. Because he had to go this way and that way and all that kind of stuff. But when he said that, I said, wow, that's fast. That was like a car almost to me. And we went to a lot of games, you know. And I haven't stopped. I mean, I don't go to any more games, but I haven't stopped watching them. Even when I was in Russia during the coup, the night of August 19th, I think it was the 19th, 20th, I don't know. Well, anyway, I called my father up because I wanted to make sure they knew that I was okay. But most of the conversation was about the Eagles' preseason game that August against the Steelers. You look it up. The Eagles played the Steelers during the coup in Russia. So it's something that I'm used to. So this was the time I was going to come on. I knew I wasn't going to get as many people in the audience, but like I said, with these small channels, it's not such an important thing that I get whatever audience I have is fine, and it's recorded. So I thank everybody for your input. I'll probably be on next week on Saturday night. Touch wood. It was a lot of fun. And again, everything I said was just generally brainstorming. I'm not saying that the Territorial purpose is actually happening, but it's a way of looking at it, so I can at least get outside myself in a not so scary way. Because being inside yourself is pretty scary. Yeah. Well, you folks are great. You're decent people, and that's hard to find. So I'm going to bid you a good night, a wonderful week, and hope you can cope with the same thing that I have to cope with. It's not easy. I'm not the only one. I got to tell myself that. So thank you, and better days ahead.